I'm Randy Brown from Coahoma ISD, and I appreciate Randy Johnson helping me out right there with getting my slide this morning. We've got some really good things going on in Coahoma ISD. I'm not going to talk about Coahoma a whole lot, but we do have some exciting things that are going on. We're a district of somewhere between 750 and 800 kids, about 100 staff members, and we are looking forward to a good year. As we sat down and talked about the topics that we could talk about this today, I volunteered to talk about the exciting good news that we have to share about school finance. I don't know how much y'all have heard or kept up with that, but our legislators adjourned yesterday, and so the news that I will give you is what we anticipate hearing as far as school finance goes. So if I can make this work, there's the first slide. We are anticipating $4 billion in cuts to public education in the state of Texas. You will see in year one that is a 6-year average across the state. So what our legislators did is they have basically two different plans. Year one was the House plan, and year two was the Senate plan to reach these $4 billion in cuts. Now this $4 billion is to our funding. We will also lose some money in grants and things like that. It really is somewhere around 5.2 or 5.4 billion dollars if you count that. And so what does that mean for Coahoma ISD is what I'm going to talk about. On year one, when you look at that 6% average for Coahoma ISD, that is $378,000, which is significant for us. Now, one thing I will add, those of y'all that have kept up with EduJob money, and that's the money that there was the discussion, I guess you would say, between Doggett and Perry about some federal money and what we were going to do with it and how we needed to do it. Texas got that money a year later than the other states, and so for 1 year we get this $164,000. Every school district in the state is getting a proportion of that. That's what Coahoma ISD gets. So without that money, our total loss would have been $542,000 for next year. But we are going to receive that, so it offsets it. That's year one. That's a 6% pretty much across the board cut. For year two, the Senate used a formula fund that's designed to lower what's called target revenue, which means that's how much funding each school district gets in the state. Target revenue varies vastly. Coahoma ISD is somewhere around $5,200 per kid. There are some districts that receive less money than us. There are some districts that receive much, much more money than us. There are some districts that receive anywhere from $7,500 to $11,000, $12,000, and at the top you have a district that receives $13,000 per student. And so for Coahoma ISD, we didn't come out too good on this because we're getting a cut of 8.7%. Well, when you start looking at different school districts and how they're funded, and we look through that list of these wealthier districts that have $7,000 and more in funding per student, many of them are getting cut 8.3%, 8.4%. But yet we're funded less than them, but getting a significantly higher cut at 8.7%. So you ask why that is. That's my question. Why is that? It doesn't seem fair. Well, we just got back, Randy Johnson and Stephen and I, Saldivar from FASA Summer Conference, and that was much of the talk at that conference was, of course, about budget and finance and the legislative session. The terms that we heard used over and over again when they were talking about our school finance system is what I have there at the bottom, is that it's incomprehensible and inexplicable. It is convoluted and complicated and very hard for, and I don't mean this critically, it's just the truth. It's very hard for our legislators to understand. It's hard for anybody to understand. And so the fact is when they've got to plug in a formula to make those cuts, and they don't always play out like they intended them to. So for Coahoma ISD, it didn't play out well for year two. But those are the numbers that we're looking at, and those are the things that we're looking at doing, getting ready for as we prepare for next year's budget. So the next slide, I'll talk about what happened. how did we get to this point in losing this money? Well, first thing that happened was back in 2006, our legislators compressed our tax rate from $1.50 down to $1.33, down to $1.04 over a 2-year period. And I'm gonna be here to tell you that that was a good thing. My family has been farmers in Hockley County and Levelland since 1924. I have heard all of my life about how property tax is unfair. And it is in many ways. For farmers and ranchers and landowners, it's not fair. I can say that because I come from a family that does that. And the way our school finance system was set up was back in the time when landowners were the wealthiest people. And so they decided that it would be a fair and equitable system to have landowners pay for their fair share of funding schools. Well, that's not necessarily true anymore. But that's the system that we have, that's the system that we live with. And so when I saw, and we all saw, that they were going to compress the tax rate down to $1.04, we all felt like that was a good thing, and I appreciate our legislators for doing it. Unfortunately, what's happened to many landowners is their values have gone up. And so even at $1.04, you may be paying more in taxes than you were at $1.50. And I want y'all to understand that as school officials, we understand that, and we appreciate that. But we're living with the same system that you are. And so what our legislators did on the second bullet there is they designed a franchise tax that was designed to make up for that lost revenue when we compressed that tax rate down. And that in turn created a structural deficit because our economy, everybody knows, I don't have to explain to you, everybody knows what's happened to our economy. And so the revenue that was expected to make up that difference didn't do it. And there's lots of political reasons, and I'm not here to criticize anybody, but there was lots of debate when that happened as to whether or not this was going to work. And there was a lot of people that now are saying, I told you so, because they did say so back then, that this is not going to work. We're going to have a structural deficit. We're not going to be able to fund our schools. And that's where we're at now. The last legislative session, back in 2009, this problem existed, but then they had stimulus money that they used to fill in this hole. Well, that stimulus money is no longer available, and so here we are. That's how we wound up with $4 billion in cuts to our public education system. So the next slide is what now? How are schools going to deal with these cuts? All right. The fact is that all school districts' budgets are made up of 70 to 80% on personnel, and so that's where we've got to start looking at. We're also cutting budgets. We are also looking at being more efficient in every area that we can, and I can assure you that we're going to do that. You know, Stephen has mentioned that we're all good friends and we talk about all these things, and we do. And you know, as we've talked about cutting budgets, Forsyth and Big Spring have both told me that they're going to cut cheerleading. I don't know what they're thinking.
He's a liar. He's a liar.
Is that on TV?
We're not going to do it in Coahoma. But no, that is not true. I did have to jab them a little bit. But the fact is we're all going to have really difficult decisions to make. And we all know that whatever decisions that we make, it's going to be difficult. One of the debates that's come out of Austin during the session is as this reality has been presented and schools start looking at, we're going to have to cut staff, and a lot of times that talks about cutting teachers. Nobody wants to see that happen. Our legislators don't want to see that happen. Believe me, we don't want to see that happen either. And so some of the debate that happened as a result of that is we started hearing folks out of Austin saying, well, they don't have to cut teachers. They can cut other people. They can cut administrators, or they can cut other staff. And I'm going to give you my take on that. I felt like Dr. Warren from Midland ISD made a good point when he pointed out that Midland ISD could cut every single administrator in their district and still not have, make enough cuts to make it up. And so the other thing that we need to point out is as we start looking at legislators or people from Austin saying, don't cut teachers, cut everybody else. Well, we look at that, but what they're talking about is cutting counselors, librarians, aides, administrators, custodians, bus drivers, and all those people are valuable. All those people are important. They make a huge difference in what we do and our ability to be effective. And what we are looking at, the catchphrase we hear all the time right now is we've got to do less with more. We're going to have to be more effective at the same time as we're more efficient, because we're transitioning from tax to STAR, a much more rigorous, much more difficult accountability system. And so, interesting times in education. So, back to the slide, we can reduce through making reductions in personnel. We can absorb positions, which I think is what all of our districts are doing. We, in Coahoma, offered an incentive for employees to resign, which helped us out. So we've made some headway. We've been proactive. We've been working on getting to this for quite some time. The other options, and none of these other options I'm going to talk about are necessarily what we're considering in Coahoma or Big Spring or Forsyth, and none of them are good. I'm going to tell you, none of them are going to be fun. But districts throughout the state are going to have to be sometimes looking at a reduction in force, and many districts have already done that, where they're actually going in and cutting staff members. Some districts are looking at a salary freeze. That's a realistic possibility for Coahoma ISD for next school year. I don't know what came out of the session that ended yesterday, but the talk was that there was going to be the possibility of a salary reduction, that we could reduce salaries, which is like I mentioned earlier, that's not necessarily what we want to do or would like to do. It's not going to be fun, but it may be something that districts consider. The other option is some districts could look at increasing taxes through a tax rate election. And again, that's not something that's going to be pleasant or fun, or I'm necessarily advocating. I'm just giving you the list of what districts are going to have to do. So we're either going to have to live with it and reduce our costs, or increase our ability to generate revenue. So what next? Here's the thing, is that a lot of legislators, a lot of school district officials are looking at, okay, if we can make it through these next 2 years, we'll be okay. And then in the next biennium, hopefully they'll take care of school finance. Well, what we heard in Austin recently is they're already predicting an $11 billion revenue shortfall for the next session. And so we can expect even more cuts on down the line. There was a lot of talk in Austin about a lawsuit as far as schools suing the state, as has happened over and over again throughout our school finance history. That is a realistic possibility. There could be talk about revising the tax system. Right now, I mentioned how we are dependent on property taxes. They could look at sales tax, franchise tax, and Texas does not have an income tax, but that is a discussion that comes up sometime. There's good and bad to that tax system, and this is not the time and place to get into that. But as I mentioned earlier, we are definitely asked at this time to do more with less. We're going to have to be more effective and more efficient. And what are we going to do about that? Well, I've mentioned all the bad news to you this morning and all the challenges that we face. But I will tell you this. There's a cliche that we hear all the time, is that nothing great is ever accomplished without passion and enthusiasm. And we're going to get over the fact that we're unhappy about what happened, and we're not going to complain. I mean, all we can do is come to work and get after it every day and give it all we've got and do what's best for the kids. And we're going to embrace the challenges that we have. We're going to do what's best for our students and keep them the priority. So what I'm saying is that we've got some challenges, we've got some cuts, but we are going to provide a quality education for our kids, no matter what. We're still going to have school, and we'll do the absolute best that we can for our kids. So that's all I've got. Thank y'all.